buying movie tickets,
Economics.
going to restaurants.
Big question mark is the GBA going to do exactly the same thing?
Cash.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining today's webinar on the future of finance in Hong Kong, Family Office Series, Part 1, Evolving Roles. My name is Agnes Chan. I'm the chairman of the Chamber's Financial and Treasury Services Committee, as well as the moderator for today's session. The rise of wealthy single-family businesses in the Asia-Pacific region in recent years, coupled by the surge in private equity activity, have not only fueled the global development of family offices, but has brought about an expansion in mandate that was merely concerned with managing and growing family wealth to also include functions that support social economic development. So what does all of this mean for Hong Kong? We are now the world's second largest cross-border private wealth management hub, and we are also Asia's second largest market for private equity. With greater attention given to attracting family offices to set up here, we can look forward to creating an even more vibrant and diverse financial services center in Hong Kong. We are most pleased to have with us today Mr. Edmond Lau, Senior Executive Director of Hong Kong Monetary Authority, to kickstart the event by speaking on the major cross-border policy initiatives beneficial for the development of family offices in Hong Kong and mainland China. I'm also delighted to introduce our panelists, Mr. Anthony Chen, CEO of Isola Capital, Professor Roger King, Senior Advisor and Founding Director of Tanoto Centre for Asian Family Businesses and Entrepreneurship Studies from the Hong Kong UST, as well as Mr. Dixon Wong, Head of Financial Services from Invest Hong Kong. They will be discussing the changing phase of family offices, including the trends with governance and their significance in society at a panel discussion later on. Now, before we begin the event, I would like to remind everyone that your camera and microphone functions will be disabled throughout the event. Please also do not record, duplicate, or distribute the contents of this event without written permission from the organizers. Presentation slides may be shared after the event, subject to approval of the speakers. And if you have any questions or comments which arise during the panel discussion, please type them in the Q&A box, and we will try to address them afterwards. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy this session. And I'll now pass the time over to Mr. Edmond Lau. Edmond, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Agnes, thank you very much for your invitation and your kind introduction. And good morning to everyone. I'm very pleased to join you for today's webinar. My special thanks must also go to the General Chamber of Commerce for arranging the webinar series on the future of finance in Hong Kong. Now, I think this event is most timely because when Hong Kong is preoccupied with so many problems brought by a combination of pandemic and geopolitical tensions, let's not just focus on the problems at hand and lose sight of the opportunities lying ahead of us. For the Hong Kong financial sector, it's not just about scaling new heights in areas that we've been playing a leading role at the regional or global level. It's also about looking for new growth engines and getting ourselves prepared to embrace the new opportunities. Now, one of these great opportunities is in the family office area, which increasingly has become an important area of the private wealth management. So today I will be sharing with you the latest developments in the FO space, as well as our continued efforts in fostering the industry's development. Now, talking about private wealth management, people naturally must think that money should be and must be parked at a safe place. So understandably, there will be some question marks now about Hong Kong's status as an IFC going forward, given the triple whammy we have faced in the past year or so, from social unrest in last year to the COVID-19 early this year, and more recently, the escalation of the US-China tensions. Now, fair enough. So before I move on to discuss the theme of today's webinar, if you don't mind, I will spare a minute or two to share some facts and perspectives, which hopefully will address some of these concerns. Now, true that we are still having a very challenging time with lots of uncertainties, but in today's world, this should be just the new normal. And despite all these, Hong Kong's financial sector has been doing extremely well in terms of both the resilience and breaking new grounds. Now, take our currency as an example. One would have thought that the Hong Kong dollar must be under extreme depreciation pressure, with all these difficulties. But on the contrary, the Hong Kong dollar market actually continues to operate smoothly under the robust link exchange rate system. Money continues to flow into Hong Kong, and in recent months, the Hong Kong dollar has stayed firmly in the strong side of the comfortability zone. And in fact, since April, the HKMA has to repeatedly trigger its strong side comfortability undertaking through market interventions. And in around just 5 months, we have taken in a total of $17 billion from the market and injected a total of 130 billion Hong Kong dollar. The continuous inflow has also been reflected in the deposit of our banking system, which recorded a rather impressive 5% growth in the first 7 months of this year. Another clear sign of our strength is in our stock market. It remains one of the most active in the world. And last year, as you know, against the backdrop of social unrest, we still claimed the top place in the global IPO league table. This year, the IPO activities continue to be very buoyant. In the first 8 months so far this year, over 80 companies were listed in Hong Kong, and the funds raised increased by 74% year on year. Underpinning this resilience is the strong fundamentals and the ample buffers that we have built up over the years. The PEG, which is the bedrock of our financial system and our real economy, is firmly supported by the sizable foreign reserves equivalent to around 2 times our monetary base. And likewise, our banking system is robust, with all key metrics exceeding international standards, with capital adequacy ratio at 20%, liquidity ratio at over 150%, and classified loan ratio at just 0.8%. Now, without sounding complacent, but I hope that you would agree that our financial system has proven its soundness and resilience after undergoing severe political, economic, and financial stress tests in recent months. And this provides a solid foundation for the further development of Hong Kong as an IFC. Excuse me. Now, against that backdrop, let me now turn to the focus of my speech today, the family office. The FO sector is a natural extension of Hong Kong's asset and wealth management business. At the end of last year, the amount of assets managed in Hong Kong reached a record high of 3.7 trillion US dollar. All right, it's in US dollar, not Hong Kong dollar, which represents a 20% year-on-year increase despite the outbreak of social unrest in the second half of last year. And we will remain to be Asia's largest cross-border private wealth management center and the world's second largest, next only to Switzerland. Last year alone, around 1.9 trillion US dollar in cross-border wealth was booked in Hong Kong. So the family office has become a key growth engine of our private wealth management business. The amount of family office and private trust assets in Hong Kong substantially increased by nearly 90% in 2009. Now, this remarkable growth could be partly explained by the favorable macroeconomic environment. The Asia-Pacific region alone has seen rapid growth in the financial wealth of high net worth individuals, which more than doubled from about 11 trillion US dollar in 2010 to 22 trillion US dollar in 2019. China, in particular, is a major contributor to this remarkable growth. There are over 80,000 ultra high net worth families in Greater China, an increase of about 20% over the past 3 years. Many of these families have strong connections to Hong Kong. For example, many of them are residing here or have their businesses listed on our exchanges. So they do have to come to Hong Kong regularly and manage their money and finance in the city. Meanwhile, we're expecting to see cross-generational wealth transfer totaling $15 trillion in Asia by 2030. So the creation and passing on of wealth has created rising demand for centralized and professional management of family wealth. This trend is particularly evident in Asia Pacific, which now accounts for 30% of the world's high net worth individuals' financial wealth, but only holds 18% of family offices. So there's still much room for growth of this business in this region. Now, with the unique advantages that we offer, Hong Kong is well positioned to capture this potential growth. First, our world-class financial services. Hong Kong, as you know, has a cluster of professional service providers and highly skilled talents that can support almost every aspect of family wealth management. We are home to over 1,800 asset management firms, including around 70 of the world's top 100 asset managers. We also have a large pool of trilingual talents that can have the knowledge and connections to serve both the Chinese market as well as the international markets. Our workforce comprises abundant professionals supporting financial services, including 45,000 certified public accountants and 11,000 practicing solicitors and barristers. Now, second, unparalleled access to investment opportunities. This is something which is unique to Hong Kong because we have a unique access to both China and the overseas market. Hong Kong's vibrant and diversified financial markets allow us to tailor-make value-added solutions and products that meets the specific investment needs of wealthy families. Hong Kong, as you know, is the dominant gateway to China, which is one of the few places in the world that still see positive growth under COVID-19. And despite the rising tension with the US, a recent study by Morgan Stanley still suggested that China will see portfolio inflows of $3 trillion over the next 10 years. So the growing use and popularity of various Connect schemes is a testament of the advantages of investing in China through Hong Kong. The Stock Connect now accounts for over 2/3, 60% of all Asia trading by overseas investors, and the Bond Connect accounts for half, 50% of the mainland bond trading by foreign investors. So people now have the direct asset scheme to access the Chinese capital market, but they still prefer to access the Chinese assets via Hong Kong. So Hong Kong's unique role, gateway role to the mainland market is hard to be replaced or replicated. Hong Kong is also an ideal platform for investors looking for alternative investment opportunities. And we understand the FOs are also increasingly interested in this alternative investment space. We're now Asia Pacific's largest private equity hub outside mainland, with over $160 billion in capital under management. But Hong Kong is more than just a place to make money. It's also a place to put your money to good and wealthy use. Many wealthy families have a cherished tradition of philanthropic giving. It's estimated that over 70% of the FOs engage in philanthropy. And on average, FOs give over $6 million annually. Hong Kong also has a long history of wealthy families setting up philanthropic foundations. So like-minded families, they can share their experience and they can also compare notes here. ESG investing is another emerging trend that is being embraced by the FOs. A recent survey indicates that 3/4 of FOs are currently involved in sustainable investments. Now, here again, Hong Kong has much to offer. We have dedicated a lot of effort into developing Hong Kong's green finance ecosystem in recent years. Last year alone, $10 billion worth of green bonds were arranged in Hong Kong. And the government is leading by example with its multi-year government green bond program. So the financial secretary has also announced in his budget earlier this year that we will issue green bonds for the next 5 years, totaling with an amount of $8.5 billion US. At the HKMA, we are also looking at ways to foster sustainable banking and enhancing the capacity building for market practitioners. We are prioritizing our own green and sustainable investments at the exchange fund, and we are also joining hands with like-minded stakeholders at the international level to promote the green and sustainable finance agenda. To stay ahead of the game, we're taking steps to further enhance our platform and also to enhance the attractiveness, the competitiveness of our financial services, so as to create opportunities and value for you, family office, and also our wealth management industry. One of the priorities is to expand your investable universe. To support investors' growing portfolio allocation to China, we will continue to enhance the various Connect scheme. So very soon, we'll be welcoming a new member to this family, the Wealth Management Connect in the Greater Bay Area. This new initiative will allow Hong Kong and international investors to better access investment opportunities in the mainland. And just as importantly, it brings new customers to our wealth management industry, because the GBA is China's most economically vibrant region. It has a total population of 70 million and a combined GDP of 1.6 trillion US dollar. So its size is huge. It's even bigger than some of the G20 countries like Australia. Many of the residents across the border are still underserved by the private wealth management industry, particularly given the rapid wealth accumulation in the past 10 years, and also because the saving rate is so high, they have a growing need to diversify their investments beyond the renminbi assets. And Hong Kong is logically the destination or the place for them to manage their money overseas. So like other Connect scheme, this new scheme will take an incremental approach starting on a prudent footing. It's important that we have a smooth start so that it will pave the way for more full-fledged private wealth management services, including the promising prospect of more family office business going forward. We're also mindful that the family offices are increasingly looking beyond the traditional asset classes. According to a recent survey, FOs on average allocate as much as 35% to the alternative investments, like real estate, private equity, and hedge funds, compared to 32% allocation to stocks. In this connection, Hong Kong is enhancing its legal and taxation platforms to attract the funds for alternative investments to set up and operate here. So just last month, we launched a new legal vehicle, the so-called Limited Partnership Fund Vehicle for private equity funds. Now, this new vehicle provides a modernized and user-friendly framework for private investment funds to set up and operate here. Also in the pipeline is our plan to introduce competitive tax concession for carried interest income generated by private equity funds. Now, these reforms, we are confident, will further consolidate Hong Kong's leading role in the alternative investment space. And incidentally, the new legal vehicle I just mentioned has also attracted the attention of the FOs, because they also see the need to manage the family wealth through a structure that can adapt to the evolving global trends of tightening tax and regulatory treatments. On top of the major reforms, we also recognize the need to provide a friendly and facilitating environment for family offices. So the HKMA has been working with the SFC and the private wealth management industry to provide more clarity in a regulatory framework to facilitate the development of family offices here. For example, the SFC has recently published further guidance on the licensing requirements of family offices. So essentially, single family offices are not required to obtain any license to conduct the business here. It has also clarified the requirements under its professional investor regime to cater for the special circumstances of FOs. And meanwhile, we know marketing service is important for family offices, and therefore the one-stop shop service for family offices will be launched soon by the Invest Hong Kong. and they will act as a central point of contact to attract and help family offices setting up in Hong Kong. You'll hear more from Invest Hong Kong in the following panel discussion section. Now, to conclude, let me just highlight a few takeaways. Now, first, Hong Kong has survived all the challenges and remains a resilient IFC and a leading wealth management hub. And second, the ever-growing private wealth in the region and the need to centralize and professionalize the management of family money is creating new opportunities for all of us. And third, Hong Kong's unique gateway to China and unparalleled access to investment and philanthropic opportunities are hard to be replaced or replicated. And we are constantly working to further improve this platform to meet your needs. So with that, I encourage you to take advantage of what Hong Kong has to offer. And if you have any questions, any concerns, or any suggestions, just simply let us know, and we'll be at your disposal. Thank you very much. And please enjoy the rest of your webinar.
Thank you so much, Edmond. Thank you for sharing all these positive messages and the very encouraging policy initiatives. Now we look forward to seeing the city leverage on these many unique advantages to grow its attraction to family offices. Now, although you won't be staying with us for the remainder of the event, I'd like to once again express our appreciation for you joining us today. Thank you very much, Edmond.
Yeah, thank you very much. I look forward to having further dialogue with your committee in the future, so that particularly after the pandemic has stabilized, and we can, have some more discussion face to face and talk more about the development opportunities and challenges for Hong Kong. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure for the audience, if you have any questions, you can still put it into the Q&A box, and we will work with Hong Kong MA, to provide, some kind of response to if you have any questions. All right. With that, in addition to hearing about what Hong Kong has to offer for family offices, I'm sure we are waiting to hear from our panelists on how exactly the role and function of family offices have changed throughout the years and their development in Hong Kong, mainland, and the rest of the world. Now, Anthony, Roger, and Dixon, before we dive into the panel discussion, can I ask or invite each one of you to just, give us a flavor of what you do and describe briefly what you see as the key change or changes with family offices in recent years. So maybe we start with Anthony and then Roger and then Dixon. Over to you. Thanks. Okay, nice. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Agnes. So by way of background, Isola Capital, we're a family office asset management platform. We act on behalf of our own shareholder capital and also third-party family offices, whether they are from Asia, from Europe, or from Hong Kong itself. I think Edmond covered very well some of the natural attributes of Hong Kong and the rationale for setting up at least some presence in this city, because clearly for family offices to function properly, they need very sophisticated infrastructure, professional services, and obviously a very stable custodian environment. So I'm not going to digress on that at this moment. But there are a few developments that we've seen over time, especially over the last decade, given the type of family offices we work with, which are from Europe, from Australia, from other parts of Southeast Asia and North Asia, where Hong Kong clearly has some access to deal flow, access to social impact type of opportunities. So we can share more about that later on. But surely, as a lot of you may be aware, because not only do we see a lot of emergence of first-generation family offices as a result of the wealth creation in the Greater China region in the last 15 to 20 years, we're also starting to see the emergence of multi-generational family offices in this part of the world, which is quite a new development. So I can share a bit more about that later on.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to, first of all, thank the organizer for inviting me to this event. I am very happy to share some of my personal experiences in dealing with high net worth or ultra high net worth individuals or families itself. Our center actually focuses on both educational purposes as well as research. I recently stepped down as a director, and my able colleague, Professor Winnie Pong, has taken over my position, but I'm still the so-called senior advisor, okay? I borrowed the term from Mr. Li Kai-shin when he stepped down. He became the senior advisor, but he and I have something different. I think he, as a senior advisor, still make all the decisions. Whereas I don't really, okay? So our focus is really on the center, have been focused very much on family businesses. But you know, family businesses is where the wealth is originally from. And so, you know, these are things that, you know, so over the last 10 years, I've had ample opportunities to speak to wealth creators or second generation wealth successors. And I always like to ask them, you know, what are important in your personal life and your family as well? And three things that come across, which I can summarize what I call the 3 Ps, okay? The first is preservation of wealth. And this is where, you know, asset management, wealth management comes in. The second is preservation of family harmony. And we're very, very well aware of lots of families, especially Asian families, have this so-called curse. Wealth doesn't go beyond 3 generations. And the question is, how does one go about that? And we'll touch upon that subject a little bit later on in the governance session itself. The third P is preservation of family value and family legacy. This is very, very important itself. And here's where philanthropy comes in and so forth and so on. Now, some of the observations I have over the past 10 years relative to family offices, you know, family office is actually a development of the Western culture itself. But in reality, we Asians, particularly those people here in Hong Kong, has had family offices for many, many years, except we just didn't call it a family office, or some people like to call it embedded family office. So, you know, it's not a separate entity, it's part of the family business, and certain individuals within the family are assigned to take care of the wealth management aspect and also provide concierge service to the family and et cetera. So we're seeing now the trend is now becoming more formalized, moving from embedded family office to more of a specialized separate office itself. So this is also something. The second is that we're also seeing next generation. I'll be able to speak a little bit more on that later on. The next generation, most of them are, you know, have their own ideas of what to do and this and that and so forth. And yet, when it comes to family business, many of them do not want to join the family business itself. They have their own ideas. But when it comes to issues related to family harmony, family wealth preservation, as well as legacy and value preservation, they all have an interest in it. So this is one of the things that I see more and more people are being put together because of the family office itself. And I'll be happy to share that a little bit later on.
Thank you, Roger. Dixon?
Good morning, everyone in Hong Kong and also Asia Pacific, and good evening to those who are dialing in from the US and Canada. It's my great pleasure to join you all today at Hong Kong GCC's webinar on this subject. I would like to thank Hong Kong GCC and also Agnes for hosting and moderating this webinar. That gives me an opportunity to speak together with the two distinguished speakers, Anthony and Professor King, on how to position Hong Kong as a family office hub in Asia. This is very timely, as Edmond has mentioned. And I believe many of you are familiar with Invest Hong Kong. For those who haven't heard about us, I would like to give a bit of background about our work. Our department was established in year 2000. Invest Hong Kong is the inward investment promotion agency of the Hong Kong SAR government. We have representatives based in over 30 countries worldwide to support overseas and mainland business to set up and expand in Hong Kong. We partner with our clients on a long-term basis and are available at any stage of the business development process. And our services are free and also customized to the client's need. I head up the financial services team at Invest Hong Kong, and of course we have other sector teams here to support other sectors. For overseas and mainland financial institutions and family offices who are interested to establishing a presence here in Hong Kong, my team will provide practical information on company incorporation, licensing regime, visa application, bank account, PR and marketing support to ensure a smooth setup on how to operate the business in Hong Kong. We work closely with regulators such as Hong Kong MA and SFC, as well as FSTB and immigration, as well as industry stakeholders such as FSCDC and also other private banks to facilitate the client's licensing, also visa applications. I think as Professor King has mentioned, the FO concept is originated from the Western countries. With the rapid growth of the number of family offices in the regions, we believe that Hong Kong is well positioned to be the family office hub in Asia. The multiplier effect of having family offices established in Hong Kong is obviously very impactful, not only benefiting the financial services sector, but also professional sectors such as legal, accounting, corporate services, and strengthens our status as an international financial center. Invest Hong Kong has been collaborating with FSTB, Hong Kong MA, SFC, and FSDC to enhance Hong Kong's competitiveness as a family office hub by launching a multi-pronged investment promotion strategies. In June, just 2 months ago, Invest Hong Kong have just launched a dedicated website with practical information tailor-made for potential mainland and international family officers who are interested to learning or wanting to set up here in Hong Kong. So we are also working together with all these stakeholders on the pitch book, which will provide a summary of all the advantages on the family office hub for Hong Kong. So the pitch book is expected to be available by end of November. We look forward to working closely with all the stakeholders in Hong Kong, so to promote Hong Kong as a family office hub for Asia. That's it from me.
Thank you, Dixon. Thank you, panelists, for the brief introduction of yourself and how you see the family office evolution. Now let's look at Hong Kong's unique role. Edmond has shared with us quite a number of initiatives that the Hong Kong government is doing to promote family offices. So, I mean, we are the leading international financial center in Asia, and the close ties with mainland obviously makes Hong Kong a preferred destination for family offices. Now, question for the panelists: how can we best capitalize on these strengths? We talk a lot about the strength. What is missing there? What are the areas we need to do better? And what do you consider to be the main drivers of growth in family offices in the region? So, feel free, anyone, panelists.
Maybe I could make a few comments first. So, Agnes, on one of your latter points, I think one of the reasons we've seen a larger, body of ultra high net worth individuals or families come to Hong Kong is because a lot of them have actually crystallized a lot of the value of what they've invested in by listing in Hong Kong, for example, or listing just north of the border in China. And they want to have some of their assets offshore, so to speak, from China, because obviously Hong Kong is the main conduit to hard currency offshore. And they also have aspirations to diversify and invest into other parts of the world. And I think one of the benefits of Hong Kong is that historically Hong Kong has always had the expertise and the environment to nurture, whether it's the professionals or attract the deal flow. And now, obviously the capital markets to sustain that type of development. So I think that's the first part of it. There's a lot of, that driver from this part of the world. But we also see from other parts of the world, in particular in Europe, where a lot of the families have traditionally have very high concentrations of their wealth in the European region, or perhaps a little bit in North America. And they've been trying over the last 5 to 10 years to get more access to Asian deal flow. And as the type of companies in Greater China or North Asia in general, or even Southeast Asia, try to reach more globally and get more visibility, what you'll find is a lot of these families will be looking to find a beachhead somewhere. And I think in Asia, we're very fortunate that, and I have to mention our competitor, which is Singapore, but there are two very interesting jurisdictions where you have all the basic infrastructure you require to set up a family office or a local office in this region. And you have access to a lot of talent, deal flow, and now increasingly more local family offices to network with. So I think that's driving a lot of the potential growth in this region. And then obviously we can talk a bit more about the competition with Singapore a bit later. So I'll park that for now.
Yes, thank you. Roger, Dixon, any comments from either one of you?
Well, let me pick up the last point. You talk about we have a lot of talent in this town itself, and it's been a very, very successful years of capital market place. But one of the interesting thing, and this is from putting on my university hat. Our university, HKUST, on a global basis, it's getting a lot of recognition. The school is only less than 30 years old, and yet we're ranked for our executive MBA program. We're ranked 9 times in the #1 in the world over the last 12 years. But more importantly, I think we're probably ranked as the best business school in Asia itself. So for us, myself, my colleagues, one of the things we're now thinking of doing for FOs is actually to create a new program, specifically executive program, specifically addressing the needs of people that are dealing with FOs, whether it's members of the next generation and the so-called family office, the high net worth individual families, or even professionals that may or may not understand the other side of the fence. So we're setting up this program. Unfortunately, this year we originally had plans to do it now, but I think we'll wait till the COBA thing is over, and then we'll have it ready. The other thing I want to talk about is HKUST taking advantage of the closeness Hong Kong has with mainland China, is now starting a new campus in Guangzhou. Actually, the Guangzhou campus and the Clearwater Bay Hong Kong campus is going to be an integral part of everything. So this will give us a very, very good access to the so-called people that need the service to assist the family office members and so forth and so on. So we're going to take advantage of that. So this is some of the developments that we're looking at and how we can help bring both China and Hong Kong together much more in a closely aligned relationship.
Thank you, Roger. Dixon, you have any comments? Or?
Thank you. In terms of Hong Kong's unique role and how we can capitalize on these strengths, I think a couple of areas, for example, as Anthony has highlighted about the investment opportunities. Hong Kong is already as the largest cross-border PWM hub in Asia and second largest in the world. And both SFO or MFO can leverage Hong Kong's unique advantage of being the dominant gateway between, I think, mainland and the rest of the world, and tap on the tremendous asset and wealth management opportunities, and taking into account of the access to GBA and also the access to the deal flows, as well as the strong IPO result, as well as the pipeline. I think all this making Hong Kong's unique role, and also we should continue to capitalize that. And apart from investment opportunities, I think regulatory framework and also resilient banking system and very simple tax regime. Hong Kong is always has a very simple and complete tax system with no capital gains tax at all and no estate duty. So only 3 direct taxes imposed, and there are generous allowances and deductions such as CTC, these sort of tax incentives. And lastly, I think the availability of professional as also highlighted by Anthony. So recruiting and retaining professionals with relevant experience is one of the primary issues and considerations for family office. So Hong Kong has a very good position here, and the strong professional services industry in Hong Kong is supported by a highly educated, skilled and workforce that is adaptable and industrials. And as Professor King has highlighted, the Hong Kong UST has contribution to that as well.
Well, it all sounds very positive and sounds like we're doing very well already. But in terms of competition, we still, see our neighboring jurisdiction. What Anthony has alluded to earlier, Singapore. It is still a strong competitor, of Hong Kong in terms of family offices set up. So we talk about, Professor King talk about talent. We talk about, a lot of investment opportunities in Hong Kong. These are all good, but I think what we want to find out is what are the areas, like regulation, innovation, talent, or tax measures. What are there still room for improvement? Because it all sounded very positive from our panelists. We're doing very well already, but there must be room for improvement. So what else do we need to do better?
Yeah, again, maybe I can start. I realize that maybe my microphone wasn't really loud, or hopefully people can hear me this time. I think maybe let's do a direct comparison with Singapore. There are many things that they've done that's done quite well, and they started maybe before Hong Kong. But there are also a lot of natural attributes where Hong Kong has strengths that perhaps it hasn't fully leveraged yet. So maybe just talk in a few specific areas. I think if you look at Singapore, for example, they started, I think, focusing on venture capital and R&D investment much earlier on than Hong Kong, in a much more serious and sophisticated way. And part of it is because a lot of their government-linked corporations were in industries such as defense or shipbuilding or whatever it was that allowed them to develop, a lot of engineering skill set and sort of technology development. So that's allowed them to perhaps be, I think, slightly ahead of Hong Kong, or maybe in some particular segments, materially ahead of Hong Kong in terms of attracting venture capital talent and also setups. But at the same time, Hong Kong, if you look in particular, more recent 3 to 5 years, it's starting to make the effort to catch up in that area. And you're seeing that one of the key areas where Hong Kong can drive venture capital is as the capital markets for these venture companies. So not necessarily maybe attracting the actual entrepreneurs and talent. Obviously, there are people in the city and those who could be attracted to come here. But because immediately north of the border, there's a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial talent, skill set, capital. But a lot of these opportunities want to tap offshore markets. And so Hong Kong has a very relevant role. And I think it's been alluded to by Edmond and also Dixon. I mean, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange as a capital market is significantly larger than Singapore, right? So I won't go into the numbers. They know better than myself. But clearly, it's a very highly attractive situation for venture capital. I think earlier there was some talk about the new limited partnership rules, and I will touch on private equity because that's obviously an area where our family office and those who work with us focus on. Again, I won't comment too much other than to say sometimes we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are very few jurisdictions in the world that offer the type of infrastructure and simple tax structure that Hong Kong, Singapore, and very few other jurisdictions offer. And if you ask most of the family offices or the professionals that represent them, maybe in some of these private investment areas, they are looking for something relatively simple and comparable. And I think that's usually something that people would be considering because we are talking about a competitive environment. And then the final thing I would talk about probably is the wealth management space, because it's actually very broad and I think sometimes quite misunderstood. And maybe what's interesting about a place like Hong Kong is, the traditional thought process about sophisticated private banking is that it comes out of Switzerland, which is clearly the case and remains the case. But the way it's evolved in Hong Kong and Singapore is quite different because the needs, not only language and culture, but because I think as Professor King alluded to earlier, a lot of the multi-generational wealth in this part of the world usually comes from some sort of family business. And very often that family business is still in existence. And the patriarch is actually still there. And the patriarch is surrounded by people that may or may not appreciate what the next generation, whether they're the second or third or even fourth generation, are seeking to achieve. And one of the things that, myself growing up, as a Chinese person, I understand this, is that the patriarch casts a very large shadow, right? It's very hard for the next generations, no matter how well educated they are or how well trained they are, to step out of that shadow. And I think as a result of that, as they try to develop their own legacy, they are more focused on the type of investments that their traditional family wealth management strategies do not encompass. So instead of relying on multiple private banks to offer certain types of products, instead of relying on asset-heavy, maybe real estate-related type investments, the next generations may be more open-minded to alternatives, right? Whether they are in private equity, private credit, venture capital. They may have very strong beliefs in certain, issues that concern the region or the world, and so they want to do social impact investing. So I think as a result, that perpetuates this growth in family offices, because for the older generations, they want to hold these next generations accountable, right? So in order to do that, instead of just giving you money and then you going off and doing it with your friends, they want them to either create their own family office infrastructure or plug into someone else's family office infrastructure so that there is some level of transparency and accountability, right? In terms of how do you originate the investment opportunity, how do you structure it, how do you co-invest with professionals or other family offices, and obviously at the end of it, what is the outcome? Are you generating the targeted returns? So I think those are the sort of things that would be worthwhile speaking more on later.
Professor King, do you agree? You have interviewed a lot of families. So are the patriots, overshadowing these younger generation?
Very, very much so. This is why I brought up the term, senior advisors. People step down as senior advisors, but in reality, perhaps they continue to manage or control everything within the family structure itself. But, and we're also dealing in a very, very challenging environment, because most of these families that, the next generation are probably educated overseas in Western cultures and so forth and so on. So the younger generation, or what we call the next gen, many of them come back with what I call their multicultural individuals. So they understand the Eastern culture, but they also understand the Western culture. And quite honestly, a lot of times these things do clash, the East and West. For example, we, as a Chinese, we tend to deal with what I call collectivism. Everything's done collectively in a group, whereas Western culture tends to be much more individualistic. So, when I'm in the West, to try to differentiate the two, what I tell people is this, if you go out to eat with the Chinese in a Chinese restaurant, they order food for the entire family, for the entire table itself, right? And if you don't like it, you just don't touch that particular dish. But in a Western meal, you go out, everybody orders individually. And even sometimes the wine you order individually. This is how you differentiate the so-called individualism and collectivism. Now, this is also very, very interesting. When a Chinese goes overseas or eat in a Western restaurant, yes, they order individually. But once the food is on the table, everybody's sharing the food. Try a little of my fish, try a little bit of my chicken, and whatever it is. And, that's how we operate. So this kind of thing, is it bad? Is it good? It's just different. And how do we operate in this environment when you have culturally differences? And of course, the next generation being multi or bicultural is very, very challenging for any family itself. So, these are some of the things that, whether you're in Singapore or in Hong Kong, you're going to encounter all of these things, and especially the nouveau riche, so-called from mainland China, where it's the first generation wealth. They, very often the wealth creator, they never went to proper education. They don't speak a foreign language itself. So, these are some of the challenges, and we can talk about that when we talk about other family issues. Yeah.
Dixon, we realize, Singapore, our competitor, Singapore, they actually, they are very proactive. The government officials, to invite potential clients, over to Singapore for a trip. Are there, what is the plan, of Invest Hong Kong in terms of further promoting, getting ourselves ahead of the competition?
Thank you, Alice. I think Invest Hong Kong, as I mentioned earlier, we are market promotion agency of the Hong Kong SAR government. So what we are trying to do is focusing more on the FO space, and especially with the rapid growth of the number of family offices in the regions. Obviously, we can do much more work on that. And in terms of addressing your question about sponsoring a client to a particular country, I think we can explore that, obviously, but we don't have this sort of budget at this moment, because we are also have a very tight, and also spending taxpayers' money is we pay much attention on that. But in terms of addressing your competition issue, as mentioned earlier by the panelists, I think I understand that some people may consider that Singapore offers various incentives targeting FOs. What I've been asked many times since I joined Invest Hong Kong, and to be honest, and I won't make a direct comparison, as we are actually Hong Kong and Singapore running two different platforms. We, as part of GBA, so we have privilege and access to the GBA markets. So that's one thing. And the second thing is the language. I always got the feedback from investor who invested in Singapore in the first place, and then also invest in Hong Kong as a secondary market as well. And they make a direct comparison. Their feedback is about the language, because Singapore is, the main language is English, and people from mainland, the language is purely Mandarin. So that's the reason why they come back to Hong Kong as the investment hub as well. But over the last few years, I think Hong Kong government has done a lot of work in terms of the market development of, say, Stock Connect, Bond Connect, and also recently to enhance further boundary, cross-border investment in wealth management products of GBA, the cross-border wealth management pilot scheme. So through this mechanism, I think a mainland investor in GBA can invest in wealth management products offered by the Hong Kong financial institutions, and vice versa, as well as the recent announcement and the implementation of the new limited partnership fund audience, which established a new limited partnership fund regime to enable private funds to be registered in the form of a limited partnership in Hong Kong. On the first day, with many applicants focusing, 11 applications were received on the first day of the implementation. So focusing on the Greater Bay Area as an investment fund. And another related and exciting development is the government's endeavor to enhance the competitiveness of the Hong Kong PE platform on the tax front. As announced by the Financial Secretary, in the budget this year, the government is working to introduce a highly competitive tax concession for carried interest, which will take retrospective effect from the financial year 2020-21. So I think all these making Hong Kong a very distinguished, and also these are the new measures for Hong Kong to attract family office investors coming to Hong Kong. And also highlight by Anthony. So there are many professionals, that available and advise FO investors on structure, the tax, and also the trust. This is very unique as well in Hong Kong because obviously GBA is a very large market, and 80,000 ultra high net worth families in Greater Bay, in Greater China, and increasing by approximately 20% in the past 3 years. And 17,000 ultra high net worth families are in the Greater Bay Area, so representing 20% of the entire China market. And despite COVID-19, social unrest, and also the trade tensions, and I think the IPO markets are very strong and highlighted by Edmond, over 80 deals completed in the last 8 months, and total funds more than 88 Hong Kong dollar billion. And more on the IPO pipeline in the applications is over 120 applications. In terms of oversubscription, is 96%. Compared to last year, it's only 81%. So I think despite all these challenges, Edmond, money continue to flow into Hong Kong. So very positive, yes.
Thank you, Dixon, for highlighting that. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, about paying for people to come to Hong Kong. Really, 2 points, very very good points you raised about the GBA connection as well as the IPO market. I mean, certainly Hong Kong is the strongest, and then really, there's no comparison, within the region. Now let's move on to family governance. Family governance are a very important aspect, although the principles behind the establishment of family offices across the globe vary, but it's interesting to hear from the panelists the perspective as to what do you consider to be the key characteristics of family offices and the concept of family governance in the Asian context. Do we need to have the patriarchs continuing the overshadowing to strengthen the governance, or what are some of the key points or concepts that we can share with the audience?
Maybe I start with some practical examples where we have our own comparison, and I'll let Professor King maybe go into more detail. What we've observed, certainly with our multi-generational family offices, they're mainly from Europe and a few from Australia that we work with, is that they have a lot more professional people who are actually in decision-making positions, whether it's at the board level or at the investment committee level. And what it demonstrates is that there has been, through the generations, a very clear delineation between, what the family wants to do and what are the targeted returns they want to achieve across an investment spectrum, right? Across the whole asset management portfolio. That's not to say that the families don't have an input, but usually they will set aside different vehicles to deal with philanthropic or social impact type investments, where maybe the focus and the KPIs are not so driven by financial returns per se, but other type of milestones. And I think that's something that's quite, different to what you would see in Asia, including in Hong Kong, where you do have third, fourth generation so-called family offices. But because everyone's living a lot longer, the influence from the patriarch is so overwhelming. And in fact, there's a lot of, I'm going to say this not to be controversial, but in a closed door environment, there's a lot of fear from the professionals in relation to how family members react to what they say in terms of certain investment opportunities. I think we haven't yet in this part of the world developed such a professional management type regime in the family office. I think that would, in my mind, be a very clear distinction between what we see in this part of the world and what we see in other parts of the world.
Yes, I totally agree with Anthony on these issues. As mentioned, the patriarch, matriarch is still the dominant factor in the family itself, and the next gen, very often very, very capable individuals, but unfortunately, their voice is not that well received itself. But we're also facing a lot of other challenges. Okay, first of all, we have this notion of what we call Industrial Revolution 4.0 coming in. And, the family business environment is changing very, very rapidly. And, try to talk to the patriarch and matriarch on Bitcoin or artificial intelligence. They have no idea what you're talking about. So this is one of the issues itself. So how do we get these people on board? So when they do make decisions for the family, of course, for the benefit of the family, they're making the appropriate decisions itself. This is very, very important itself. I always say that, it's very, very interesting. Family business life cycle is getting shorter and shorter these days because of the Industrial Revolution 4.0. But unfortunately or fortunately, human life cycle is increasing, okay? So, it's very likely in the future, in one life cycle, there'll be several business cycles within that. And each business cycle will bring in different kinds of needs. So this is very, very important. The other thing we notice is that, dealing with outsiders, Chinese, ethnic Chinese families tend not to trust outsiders, okay? The notion of trust. This is why a lot of professional service providers have difficulty in dealing with families. And families like to keep certain information to themselves. If they deal with several different advisors, they'll just feed a little bit of each to each one, not the entire picture itself. And sometimes the next gen doesn't have the entire picture either. So these are some of the things. So, trying to set up a governance system within the family whereby, there's clarity, especially agreement amongst the next gen who culturally is a little bit different, although they maintain their old ethnic culture itself, but still, you have to make provisions for that. That's very, very important itself. So how do we deal in that kind of environment when the world's changing so rapidly? And this is something that needs to be addressed. And the older generation, sometimes, they live to 90, 100 years old. They're still holding on to all the decision-making process itself. There's got to be a process where they really can retire properly, okay, and become a senior advisor. I think I'll stop at that.
But Roger, do you see that improving in a way? Because the patriots are, although with a longer lifespan, they're still around. But we are seeing, from our client base, that the next generation is coming up. Yeah.
Well, I think the next gen, this is where hopefully the next gen is armed with certain skills to deal with the older generation itself, and recognize that their older generation have certain needs. And how do you satisfy those needs, right? This is, again, to suggest that they should lock themselves in a room and don't come to the office or whatever it is and don't talk to anybody, that's not going to work either. So I think, the younger generation or the next gen have to be intelligent and have the ability to deal with the older generations, so to get things through. And this is where, financial things is one thing. We talk about how do you maintain family harmony, which is very, very important. How do you bring the next gen and the current gen all together? This is very, very important itself. We can go into lots of details, examples, and everything else. And also, we talk about philanthropy, that family value system. When it comes to value system itself, the older generation are the ones that demonstrate through their own things. Most older generations tend to be rather frugal. They don't like to waste money and everything else, and they're counting their pennies even though they have billions. I think the younger generation have to respect that and also take that into consideration. So one has to design a system when we talk about family governance, family constitution, a system that is acceptable to both generations or multiple generations.
I remember I hear this joke from a client that he got the key to the office, but it's the father who's opening the door. So, he's sort of puzzled, how do I get to have the key as well as be the person who opened the door?
Right.
Yeah. Well, maybe just related to that, Agnes, I think two issues actually crop up during the later stages of the first generation or second generation's life cycle, and I think it has to do with succession planning and tax, and they're both very relevant for Hong Kong. Most of the issues surrounding succession planning, apart from family harmony dynamics, which I think Professor King's alluded to, which is a big issue, is how do you have enough to share around, and how do you share it in a way so that the next generation can sustain somewhat or most of that wealth or maintain a credible legacy. So I think those are the things that the prior generation starts thinking about as they get older, even though they are living older and longer. And in Hong Kong, I think we have, similar to Singapore, a very straightforward tax regime in relation to probate, in relation to capital gains and dividends and interest. So that's a very helpful environment. But also having the expertise to go and structure solutions so that people can set up funds. So maybe the next generation can set up a fund vehicle, have professionals manage it, maybe across multiple vehicles and multiple strategies. So these are things that we're starting to see. So again, the traditional family office being a single vehicle, I don't think really is what's going to happen going forward. You're already seeing family offices, especially the larger ones. And I note that in some of the materials we reference a particular individual. And these first generation entrepreneurs, not only are they still very entrepreneurial, but they're extremely sophisticated with asset management and financial services. So the way you see how they structure things is not so much focused on pure preservation and concierge service. They're actually very focused on getting access to certain deal flow and generating certain returns, and also focusing on areas where the next generation wants to get exposure to. So I think that's something to consider, and obviously ties into why Hong Kong is a relevant jurisdiction.
Right, thank you for that. Dixon, you have any additional point to add on family governance aspect?
I completely agree with Professor King and Anthony's comments. On financial aspect, managing and maintaining families' assets and core business and investing the family's wealth, both recurring and principal through alignment of families' objectives to the risk and return of the investment mandates, hedging of risk, and also AUM allocation between active and passive strategies. I think on one hand, financial aspect is important, but also the family governance systems within the family among the next generations is also important. And that's the reason for succession planning, structured solution as highlighted by Anthony, also multiple fund vehicles, transfer of established wealth across generations. And I completely agree the value system that should be established and fully respect and recognized that across the generations. That's very important as well.
Thank you. Let's take a look at future trends. I'm conscious of time. We just have a couple more questions and then we'll move into Q&A. Now on future trends, we see that like any other business, it is necessary for family business to evolve and then keep up with times. I mean, like what Professor King mentioned, Bitcoin. If not Bitcoin, we need to learn about digital currency, which is coming soon. An example of the evolution is like the case of the Blue Pool Capital. The family office that belongs to the Chinese billionaire, Joseph Tsai, which bought the Brooklyn Nets, a US professional basketball, in late 2019. So, I mean, what are the latest trends for the panelists? What are the latest trends in family office investment strategies, governance, or other aspects? And what might be the reason behind this evolution?
Well, maybe I'll just take a slightly different approach here. Okay, what we observe is what we call the concept of from family business to business family itself. What happens is that usually the initial wealth comes from the family business, and that family business itself, it could be broadened into different categories of subcategories and so forth. But the next generation, they really want to do something on their own. And, recently, a couple of years ago, Shanghai University did a study on the next gen from mainland China, going broad study coming back. 80+% do not want to join the family business. They actually want to start their own business, okay? So what happens is that you start with a family business, then it gradually evolves into what I call business family itself. So you have a portfolio of different kinds of businesses and so forth. So when you talk about that kind of trend is very, very interesting. So the question is that, so one of the things, for example, if people come and talk to me, I always say that the family should set up a investment, what I call angel fund, for future generations to start pursue their own passion itself in businesses or even other things. Okay, so I see this as kind of a trend beyond just pure investment in other people's businesses and so forth. So within the family, there's way to encourage future generations to pursue their own passion. Of course, many of the younger generations, they're all happy to get into high-tech ventures and so forth and so on. I always tell my Western friends, the next generation, they all want to be horses. I say, what do you mean, well, horses? Jack Ma and Pony Ma, right? They all want to be Ma's, right? So so the older generation, this is the one kind of investment we're really talking about. Another type of investment, we talk about alternate investments, also very, very interesting. In fact, I normally, when I do this, I usually invite my good friend, Jonathan Stone from Christie. He's the chairman of Asia. And we talk about alternate investment into art, antique, and wine. Okay, so this is also kind of interesting. It's only the younger people that are, I always tell people I'm a wine connoisseur. I can tell the difference between red and white blindfolded. Why? Because red wine is room temperature and white wine tends to be cool, right? So but the younger people, they see things very, very differently. So this is they see art as part of the investment opportunities, so these are different kinds of investment. Alternate investment is very, very interesting. So, we can talk about all different kinds of investment, but I thought I'd just bring in the alternate investment, wine, art, antiques, okay? So this is another, I see a lot of so-called wealthy individuals. So this is an area that they're moving into. By the way, Hong Kong happens to be probably the world's largest wine trading capital, through various means, even though we don't produce a drop of wine. Okay.
Ever since we canceled the wine tax.
Yeah,
the red
exactly.
wine.
Yeah.
Well, that is interesting, from family business to business family. Yeah. Any final comments from Anthony and Dixon? Then we'll move on to the Q&A session.
Yeah, maybe just a quick comment, and I think Professor King alluded to this. One of the things that probably you don't recognize, but if you look into it, what's really driven a lot of this desire to go into alternative assets and the ability to even do it cross-country is technology. So we talk so much about investing in technology, we forget that information technology is what's allowed this to happen. So to give you an example, one of our European families, I remember I spoke to the chairman a number of years ago. He told me that back in the 80s or 90s, they would meet once a year in the Bahamas or somewhere for families to gather together to discuss deal opportunities. It was like an investor club. And that was all they could do because they didn't have the digital technology that we had that would allow us, for example, to Zoom right now, to have so many people on board in an environment where we can have productive discussion. And it was really a high touch type of environment where trust was critical and being able to do things in a very private way. And I think you fast forward to now, 20, 30 years later, not only are the future generations much more digitally savvy, but because there's so much information available, not only through their own education, personal education, but their own access to information so that they can compare information about companies, about sectors, to go deep into opportunities. And I think that's really what's also opened up this desire for people to move into alternatives, because historically it was a black box, right? You don't understand how people do private equity, how do they look at startups and early stage opportunities. So the prevalence of technology is allowing people to better understand what underlies the opportunities for investment, and I think that's also driving that trend in the future.
Thank you. Dixon, final comment?
Thank you. I think apart from wine, that the younger generation are interested, arts and antiques, they are also interested to know more as well in the family office space. Apart from wine, arts and antiques, and I've got some questions from the recent family office about the impact investing as well. So, which is also an increasing popular subject for FOs. Top impact investment areas by FOs such as the education, agriculture and food, energy and resource efficiency, as well as healthcare and wellness. These are also the top areas focused by the FOs. In terms of sustainable banking and green finance, obviously, as we all know, Hong Kong MA is one of the largest asset owners globally. So it launched 3 sets of measures to support and also the green finance last year in green and sustainable banking, responsible investment, and Center for Green Finance. So these are the focus on social responsibility and sustainable development as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, panelists. I think I know the audience has been waiting for the opportunity to raise their Q&A. And I'm seeing the Q&A coming in. Okay, the first question, what are the process and time frame differences in raising capital from family office here in Hong Kong compared to the USA? Looks like it's for Anthony, this question.
I don't think there's a general answer for this. Depends on what you're raising capital for, right? Is it a venture capital investment or a private equity opportunity, and where is the underlying company situated? So notwithstanding my last comment before the Q&A, I think if the underlying investment opportunity is not from this part of the world and people are not that familiar with it, obviously it will take longer, right, than the guys in the US who may be on the ground, have experienced the product and service from that target company. So I think it's really driven on a case-by-case basis. I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I don't think there's a general answer for something like that. But maybe just one last bit on that. I think what you'll find is a lot of capital raising or capital introduction is being directed into Hong Kong in particular, because people understand that there is a lot of family office capital in Hong Kong. So that, you know, if they have something that's relevant and interesting, they will just as likely find investors in Hong Kong as in other key cities in the US or Europe.
Thank you. Next question. Well, the onset of COVID-19 has had a major disruptive effect on business around the globe. How have family offices weathered the crisis? Who would like to pick up this?
I mean, look, I'll make another comment. I think basically everyone's been affected by it, but what we've seen, maybe not so much on their portfolio side, but for a lot of the ultra high net worth and family offices, and it sounds you know, terrible to say this, but they've actually done quite well during the COVID crisis on their so they've been able to borrow at, you know, very cheap rates. They've got access to you know, ability to invest in sophisticated investment products, primarily on the secondary side, the structured products, derivatives that have been able to benefit from the market volatility. So it's a bigger issue and broader issue that if we go, you know, digress on this, it gets into, you know, sort of the wealth gap. But I think in general, from what I have observed, a lot of family offices have been able to offset any impact to their underlying businesses that were affected by COVID by potential gains that they've accrued on the liquid side of their portfolio because they've got access to cheap capital.
I actually don't see, I mean, family offices are perhaps, you know, they have other channels of, you know, fundraising, but it's basically the same, you know, as any other businesses, right, under COVID. You know, it depends on which industry sector you are in and therefore the impact. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to another question. Okay, Anthony just mentioned transparency. In this digital world, will the position of family offices be diminishing as the younger generation has access to many deals? How should family offices equip themselves? I think both Professor King and Anthony and Dixon, you know, I think this is a question.
Yeah, well, I'll do a quick reply to that. I think the younger generation are not avoiding the family office. They're setting up their own or their own vehicles. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the concept of family office is evolving itself. the so-called single-family office concept or multi-family office concept or hybrid concepts are still evolving. So I don't think family offices themselves will be eradicated. What will happen is they will become more and more like asset management platforms. Hence, potential for regulation. And also one other thing that I think people are experiencing themselves when they move to a jurisdiction to set up a family office is, can they find the right group of people to put together? So access to talent is not the issue, but finding the combination of talent so that they work well together in a family office environment can be very challenging, right? Because you're managing upwards in terms of dealing with family members and their needs, and then you're managing downwards in terms of trying to run a professional asset management platform to generate targeted returns.
Yeah, just a comment. Actually, it relates to we were talking about future trends and so forth. If you look at the family office itself, if you focus just on asset management, that's one thing. Okay, I like to look at it on a much broader basis, what I call the 3 Ps itself. So in this part of the world, we have the family business usually acts as the glue that keeps the family together. So my prediction is that family office actually is going to replace family businesses as the glue that keeps the family together itself. This is, I sense that, and the younger generation are the ones that are going to be sort of managing these activities. In fact, for my own family itself, I honestly let my sons, who are very, very capable individuals, to take care of the asset management and so forth and so on, because at the end of the day, I have the feeling that whatever they do, it's going to be their money anyway. So if they screw it up now, they're going to screw it up. That's their loss in the future. Yeah. But then the older generation can actually deal with the philanthropy and all these other things where you maintain the family legacy and so forth and so on. This is to me is very, very important. So you can get everybody together. Different people have different talents, different generations have different interests, and everybody come together for the benefit of the family through the family office itself. So this is what I think might happen.
Thank you. The next question, there's one question for Invest Hong Kong. Dixon, where can I find the major figures that you mentioned on the family office market size?
Thank you. In terms of the figures, I think as we all know, it can be SFO and it can be MFO, and sometimes an asset management company can be in family office type of arrangement. So what we can see is from the SFC licensing statistics, and in terms of the registered entities and also in terms of the registered individuals, the number of licenses keep increasing in the last 6 months, as we can see that from the SFC recent statistics. So this is very encouraging, as all the asset management companies who are running the money for the third parties are required to have that license in place for the entities as well as the individuals themselves. So we can see this number keep increasing, and this number is publicly available through the SFC website.
Okay, so we can actually access that. And also for the audience who raised the question, we will check with MA if there are any slides or the availability of those statistics that Edmond mentioned. I think probably on the MA website, some areas within MA website. Now there's a question on national security law. Do you think the NSL has any impact on ECOS?
I'm happy to take that. Look, I think family offices are set up for long term, right? And they generally diversify. So any law or any regulation or any development of similar things in any jurisdiction will have an impact on how they set up themselves. And I think one of the things that you'll find is most, family office vehicles that set up, let's say in Hong Kong, they probably already have some capability in other jurisdictions, including Singapore. So they always hedged. That's what I would say.
Perhaps I can chip in. I fully agree with Anthony's statement. Actually, investors family office investors are more institutional, and also they are more macro and long term. So investors are always would like to expect, orderly and smooth wealth generations. This is one thing, and also the preservation of the assets. So obviously, this law would enable the objectives of all these to be achieved there.
Or as some family offices clients mentioned, it is not just Hong Kong that has NSL. I mean, NSL is everywhere. I mean, even Singapore, China, all other countries, they have national security law. So it shouldn't really, because of the presence or existence of this law, that will impact on the establishment of FOs. And FOs really determine, where to set up based on what's available there, right? What's available in the individual location. Now, because of time, the question that we just answered is the last question. Now, let me just make a closing remark. Now, thank you, panelists, for a very engaging exchange. We have arrived at the end of the event. Thank you, Anthony, Roger, and Dixon, once again for sharing your insights on the evolution of family offices with us. The Chamber has also lined up 2 more webinars to explore 2 points that we have discussed, by the panelists. On the digital side, we have a digital transformation of family offices and also their roles in ESG responsible investment. And these will take place respectively on October 13th as well as October 30th. And I would encourage all of you to sign up to those events so you can have a better picture of what the future holds for family offices. And also please refer to the Chamber website for further details. And I hope that, ladies and gentlemen, you have enjoyed today's event and were able to take away some useful information on the topic. Very key uniqueness of Hong Kong, our connection to China, GBA initiative, our investment opportunity, the very strong IPO market, and also, the strong professional team here. So on behalf of the Chamber, thank you very much, and I'd like to wish you a safe week ahead. Thank you.